Hello everyone, welcome from the Calabasas Library. You are here with us today in the archive room of the library. This is where the City of Calabasas Historical Collection is held, and it's a collection that comprises thousands of photographs, hundreds of books, and many, many documents. My name is Brian Rooney, and I'm a local historian who was brought in to help organize this collection and make it easier to access by all of you. Because for many years it's been locked away and not really accessible to the public, or it's hard to know what was here. And so I'm cataloging everything and indexing everything and scanning a lot more photos and making things available to all of you. Coming up soon, I will be scanning all of the indexes of these books so that individual people, places, dates, and events can be found using a word search just like Google. Archiving is important because it is a link to the past of you, your family, your community, and of time and place. It's important to save and store materials that would have meaning and value to a wider community, because if you don't, it's possible that no one else will. And if that happens, that piece of history could be lost forever. What to save and store is entirely your call, but the best photographs especially, and those with the greatest resonance, are those with a strong sense of place. So what is a strong sense of place? It's when the place where a photo was taken is easily recognizable today. Usually this happens with an old house or building that is still standing. Natural features like a mountain or a lake also work. When a visual element anchors the photo, you have a strong sense of place that allows you to stand in the same spot with the old photo and see the passage of time. It's kind of like a time machine. Here, the matching mountain ridgeline in both images presents a strong sense of place and a time span of 60 years. This is actor Johnny Crawford holding a photograph of himself and his co-star Chuck Connors from 60 years earlier, when they played father and son on the popular TV Western, The Rifleman. The modern photo was taken in the same place where the historic photo was taken, evidenced by the matching ridgeline in the background of each image. If you're interested in doing an informal family portrait with outstanding resonance, a good setup is to shoot the family in front of their house with a family car placed between the people in the house. This arrangement shows place, people, the fashions of the time, and the vehicle of the era, all in one photo, and it's an excellent way to capture and preserve a moment in time with a strong sense of place. Now let's jump into storage and look at some of the best practices of preserving and archiving photos. The digital era of photography has made storage of photographic originals or masters much easier, as they are held on hard drives now. But from the birth of photography up until about the year 2000 or so, photographic originals were slides and negatives, and they were easily damaged and greater care was required. A great way to store strips of negatives is in plastic sleeves like these, made from special material that doesn't damage your film over the long term. They are very budget-minded. If you want to step up to a professional level, these paper boxes are better, but are more expensive. The advantage of the plastic sleeves is that they allow you to quickly preview what's in the negatives by holding them up to a window or up to a light, whereas the paper boxes, while more formal storage, do not allow you that speed of preview. Same goes with mounted slides. The plastic pages are budget-minded, but the pro-level boxes are better. With prints, matting and framing them, of course, is very good. But there are also excellent professional print storage folders and boxes out there for your prints of all kinds of different sizes. As far as photo albums go, the old-fashioned black pages with photo corners popular from the 1930s to the 1960s are actually good, even though they look quite old. They are good. But the print storage to stay away from and to discontinue using, if you are the photo albums that were popular from the 1970s up until the 1990s, as this plastic that touches your photos and supposedly protects them is actually deteriorating your photos, and the glue on the pages behind your photos that hold them in place are also damaging your photos. The key is to use archival or acid-free storage materials, as that is what the largest universities, libraries, and archives use. And to never use tape, glue, paper clips, or staples, as all of those will damage your photographic originals. So now let's look at scanning. Capturing old photos and documents in digital form is a great way to preserve them with backup copies, but it's also a great way to share these materials with others through reprints or photos sent by email or posting them online. Okay, most of what I want to share about with the scanner is not with the scanner machine itself, but rather with the interface that controls the scanner. So let's go ahead and open that interface right now, and I'll show it to you. Okay, so this is a normal Epson interface. And with the Epson scanners being so popular, chances are good that if you've got one at home, you might have an Epson, and the interface should look something like this. So, as far as I understand it, when these things come out of the factory, I believe that they are preset up here in the upper right-hand corner to the full automatic mode, which is that right there. And you can see there's almost no buttons here. This is essentially a color photocopier, sort of, where you just put something on the glass and you press the button and it goes. It makes all the decisions for you. However, the quality is not going to be as high and the flexibility is not going to be as high. And so I actually don't recommend using the full automatic mode. So going back up here to the drop-down menu, it's interesting that I have always, for the last 15 years, maybe even 20 years of my scanning, I've never used anything but the full professional mode because I do want all the choices. I want all of the features and everything. And I'm actually not the right person to ask about either the office mode or the home mode because I've never used them and I don't know what they do. But it goes without saying that all the good stuff, all the capability is always going to be in the full professional mode. So that's what I personally use. So when we go up here to the top, basically the first window will ask you if you're scanning film, either slides or negatives, or are you scanning something reflective like a book page or a photograph or a magazine, something like that. So let's assume it's reflective first of all. Okay. So again, having selected reflective here, the next drop-down menu down here, it's going to ask you if it's a photograph or a document. And those are pretty self-explanatory. If it's a typed page, if it's a page of text, if it's a diploma, for example, that's a document. But if it's a photograph with the fine color gradations or the fine black and white gradations that make up photography, you'll get more of that to come through in your scan if you choose photo. So let's assume that we're scanning a photo. The next thing down here is which color setting you want to use. And it's interesting because the human eye basically can't see a difference between 48-bit color and 24-bit color. It's there in case you want to use it. And it's interesting because generally you won't see any difference. Like I said, the human eye can't see the difference, but where you will see the difference is if you open up a histogram for an individual scan and take a look at the bar graphs in there, and you'll see that there's more data for the 48-bit scan than there is for the 24-bit scan. And it is interesting. This is one of those esoteric things where it's kind of like a $50,000 home stereo and a $5,000 home stereo. Will you really hear the difference between the two? Maybe, maybe not. Same thing here with 48-bit versus 24-bit. Will you see the difference? Very likely not. But it's there in case you want to use it. So I normally just do 24-bit scanning because it's absolutely fine and it doesn't create such a huge file. So the next thing down is resolution. Now, 300 is a really great default because that's what professional printers always ask for. That is a resolution that will give you very, very crisp imagery. But there is if you are scanning just for the internet and just for sharing on screens, you can actually save some file space and go down to 72 dpi, because that's all that even the highest res screens will render in. They can't render anything higher at last report than 72 dpi. But if you are scanning to create a print, an actual paper print, something to hang on the wall, for example, you'll always want to do at least 300. So why are all these other settings down here? Well, this can be a fast way to make a really large print without thinking about it too much. And I'll get back to that in a second. But for now, we're going to leave that at 300 dpi. Okay. So let's go ahead and let me think here. What's the easiest way? Okay, I'm sorry. The next thing down is that is the histogram that I was mentioning earlier. These are the bar charts. Since there's no data in here, there's nothing to show. But this is where you'll see bits of data more compressed, more dense with a 48-bit scan than a 24-bit scan. And I really don't, like I said, I don't use that very much. So I rely on Photoshop for these much more intensive controls and things like that. So I don't worry about that. What I do use, however, is on occasion I do use this image adjustment to give you a better looking scan right away. So if, for example, your original is a little bit too dark, for example, you can lighten it up slightly here or add contrast to it and saturation and things like that. These are some of the basic controls that are also in Photoshop for color correction. But if you don't have Photoshop, this is a great way to do a little bit of color correction. After you've made the first scan, you can see the changes going back and forth by sliding these in the preview mode. You can slide these sliders back and forth and see the changes before you actually make the scan, which is nice. So that's what that is. Unsharp mask is a funny thing because it means you are actually making your picture sharper, which is good. And why it's called unsharp, I've never really understood. So I usually leave that clicked all the time or selected all the time. The descreening box is only used when you are scanning a original or scanning a page, for example, out of a magazine or a book. And the reason why descreening is important is because with printed imagery, lithographs, for example, lithographic and offset printing is done using a series of tightly compacted dots in the printing process. And if you look at a magazine or a book photo really closely, you'll see the dots, especially if you have a magnifying glass. The dots are everywhere in there, and the entire image is made up of dots. So the reason why descreening becomes important is because a scanner, well, let me backtrack for a second. The human eye will forgive and not see necessarily the dots if you're not looking for them. We tend to gloss over them and we just see the image. Whereas the scanner is a neutral eye, shall we say. And when it scans, it's going to pick up all of those dots that the human eye tends to ignore. So descreening is a way of telling the scanner software to please minimize those dots, and that's exactly what that is. And it allows you to choose between the four major, well, there's three major really. It's newspaper, magazine, and fine prints, for example. So whichever one you're using, if you're scanning out of a magazine, just click right there and you're ready to rock. So let me do this. I am going to, let's see, probably what's the best thing to do here. I think that's it. Those are all the major controls. And I know that we're going to jump to a segment on actually scanning a print in a second here. And we're going to scan negatives and slides in another segment here. So I think that's the majority of what I wanted to show you. One thing I do want to also go over is TIFFs versus JPEGs. So a JPEG is the most common format out there of photograph. It is nearly everything you see on the internet, for example. Nearly everything that gets emailed to you as far as an image is a JPEG. It's very common. It's a great format. What it does is that when you shoot a picture with your digital camera, for example, and it goes into a JPEG, it is actually compressing a lot of the data in that image. And again, you won't see the data loss, but it is compressing that, which is why it makes it a very friendly format for sending images back and forth, because the file sizes are not enormous. So what's interesting about a JPEG is that if you shoot a picture with it, like I said, or scan it into that format, you're already losing a little bit of data. So say, for example, you scan a picture of a barn, and you've got barn.jpg as the title of your picture. When you open up that image, for example, and retitle it barn number 2 or barn in Evansville, Ohio, for example, if you retitle the image and you resave it, a little bit more data, a little bit more sharpness, a little bit more color, for example, a little bit more clarity gets dropped from the image every time you do that. Now, most people are not going to rename the same JPEG over and over and over and over and over. But the reason why it's important is that from an archival standpoint, from a preservation standpoint, archivists don't use JPEGs because they will tend to degrade like that over time. They won't degrade by themselves. They will degrade if you open up and resave them with a new title and then save that as another image, for example. But the very fact that that happens makes them non-archival, because anything that can happen to that, anything that degrades that image over time, is not considered a good archival standard. So I bring that up because over here, under this little drop-down window, you'll see all these different ways to scan something. And of course, with this scanner, for example, you can scan directly into a PDF. If you've got a bunch of pages in the document and you want to reproduce that document into a PDF, you can scan it to a PDF. But jumping back to photographs, here's JPEG here, and here's TIFF at the bottom. The TIFF format is the standard. It is the preference of archivists on a global basis, because it is called lossless, LOSSLESS. It doesn't lose anything, no matter how many times you open it, no matter how many times you save it, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't drop data when that happens. I don't believe a TIFF is any less susceptible to data corruption, for example, than a JPEG, because when an image file goes bad, it goes bad. And it's just this unknown characteristic that we haven't been able to figure out yet, why image files will simply go bad sometimes. So it never hurts to have backups of your image files. But TIFFs are considered the archival standard because they never drop any data over time. Even though, like I said, they will corrupt, just like a JPEG will. But you are far safer. If you're looking at 100 years out, 200 years out, you definitely want to be saving stuff as a TIFF. If you're looking for real archiving purposes and museum quality scans, that's what you want to use as a TIFF. Now, here's what's interesting, and you'll see this when we actually scan a print in the next section. A TIFF is dramatically larger file size wise than is a TIFF. Sometimes it's only I would say 5 times larger, but oftentimes it can be 10 times larger or more. So for example, if you scan something as a JPEG and it's like 5 megabytes, and that's a pretty big scan to get 5 megabytes out of a JPEG. If it's that large as a JPEG, the very same scan, the very same size, the very same parameters can easily be 50, 60, 70 megabytes if it's a TIFF. But that's where the incredible strength of that format comes from. You are not losing any data, and it is locking that data in place as best it can, and that costs you file space. It costs you file size and hard drive space, and that's why a lot of professionals out there who are doing archiving, or professional photographers who save their work as TIFFs, they have hard drive after hard drive after hard drive of backups and all kinds of storage space, much more so than the average home user does. But so that's all that there. So I think that's it. So basically, before you scan, you go into this box and you tell it where you want, what type of scan you want to do. I'll just put it back to JPEG here for a second. You tell it where you want it to, what type of format scan you want it to be in, and then where on your computer do you want this thing to be saved. And of course it'll open up the standard drop down of a directory tree on your system, and it will ask you where you want to save it, for example. So so that is the basic interface, like I said, of the Epson scanner. There is quite a bit more that could be done here, but this is meant to be a kind of an opening, an introductory tutorial, things like that. So, but we'll take a break here. We'll come back in a second for the actual print scan, and we'll do some negatives, or a negative right after that. Okay. Okay, let's do a scan. This is a little strange because I'm behind the camera here, but this is the best way to show everyone, you know, how we do this. And it's going to take a little bit longer to get things done here because I am doing it to show you folks, but that's okay. So things will take a little bit longer here. Let me get some stuff out of the way off camera. Here's my mouse. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and start with a sample print. Here is a picture of one of the old Calabasas schoolhouses, and making a scan is as simple as this. Opening up the lid and putting it on the glass, like so. Okay, close that down. Then come back over, and with the interface that you saw earlier here, we go ahead and do a preview setting, but before we do that, I'm going to scan this in color at 300 dpi. We've got that. Let me get this bar back up over here. Okay, this is, because it is a print, it is reflective. The document table always just stays a document table. Photo is photo, that's good. It's not a document. Okay, so, and we're gonna leave off the descreening since it is not a magazine photograph. So, I hit preview, and the scanner will probably take a second to warm up. Okay. And it gives us a preview, which we then need to click on this window to get it to pop out. Okay, so there is our picture. Okay, so clicking back over to the interface, here's personally what I would do. I am going to select, instead of target size, personally I scan everything at usually 24 to 36 inches across. Reason being is that if I ever have to make a display print of this image, I am ready to go with the original scan that I've done. If you scan this, this is a small, like a 5-inch wide photo. If you scan this, for example, at 8 by 10, and you later want to decide that you want to have that made into a larger print, again, the display size print, you will have to either rescan it, or either rescan the original, or rescan a print that you've made to the larger size, and it just involves more work. So, and there's nothing wrong at all with having done a 24 or 30 or 36 inch wide print that you then end up making it into an 8 by 10 if you want it to be that size. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's better to have too much data, too much size, than not enough. Because if you take a scan that you did at 8 by 10 and you try to make that into a 30-inch wide print, it will start to get fuzzy. It will pixelate because there's not enough data there. Okay, so under target size, it defaults to original. Now I personally have a lot of presets. There will be some presets that comes with the scanner. I have put a lot of custom stuff in here, a lot of custom sizing in here, and I'm going to call this one, I'm going to use a setting I use called 3 by 5 inch big, which means it's roughly the parameters of a 3 by 5 inch print, and it shows me that with these dotted lines here that I will then drag up to approximately the picture area, just like so. And I'm cropping out a little bit of the bottom, and that's fine, just for this sample, for the sample tutorial. So there are these little dotted lines here that I've just grabbed up. So it's basically taking what is a 3 by 5 inch print, and it's now going to scan that because of my preset size. I've created this setting in here, which can be done in just moments on the Epson system, where I tell it if I have a 3 by 5 inch print, every 3 by 5 inch print that I scan is going to now come out to 24 to 30 inches wide. So that's already set up. And once I go ahead and drag my little selection area basically around the print, all I have to do is hit scan, and it will now make a scan. So I am going to send this into, that's fine there, we'll make it a JPEG, that's fine. Okay, so we're going to send that in, and we're going to use this same picture several times to show you some things. And waiting for the scanner to get going again. There we go. You can see the progress bar. It says that my larger print will take upwards of, looks like it's less than a minute now. It originally said 4 minutes, but it takes under 60 seconds. Now a smaller print is quite a bit faster. It will actually take probably 30 seconds or even 20 seconds. But because I'm doing a larger print, it's taking longer to make the scan. The scanning bar inside the scanner is moving more slowly, and that's fine. Totally okay. I did a scan once that was about 8 feet tall from a small image, and that one scan took hours for the scanner to perform. So, okay, so this thing's coming up as being done here. And wait for it to be done. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. It has now sent it to the folder on my desktop where I did some previous scanning, which is fine. So one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is JPEG versus TIFF. These are the digital file extensions that they are probably the two most common ones out there. JPG is by far the most common photographic format out there because it is widely used, it does a great job, and it's not overly large. And by large, I mean the file sizes aren't huge, making them difficult to email and share online, for example. Almost every picture you see online is a JPEG, which is fine. Sometimes there's GIFs, sometimes there's some PNGs out there, but those are much less common. So the reason why I bring up JPEG versus TIFF, which is .TIF, is because if you're really serious about archiving, you don't want to use JPEGs, at least not initially, because TIFF, the TIFF format, is the professional archival standard. And it is that way because it can be copied over and over and over thousands of times. That TIFF scan that you do can be opened and copied as many times as you want, and none of the data will be lost. The difference with the JPEG is that every time you open it and resave it, for example, resave it with a new name, if you were sending it out to a guy named Joe and you wanted to put his name on the image, for example, you would send it to him. It would degrade very slightly with that resave and that retitling, and when you send it to your friend. And every time you do that, if you sent that one to Pete and Pete sent it to somebody else, if Pete opened it and retitled it and resaved it, for example, it would lose a little bit more data each time that happens. Now, what's interesting is that I believe it takes 20 to 25 saves and retitles for a JPEG to really start showing its degradation. But, and the chances of that happening in the average situation for the average user is slim to none. But because archiving, when we're talking about archiving, we are talking about not this year or next year, but we're talking 50, 100, or hundreds of years away. The archival standard TIFF is the one to use because it basically guarantees that unless the file is corrupted, unless the photo file is corrupted, you will not have any degradation over the lifetime of the file. So that's interesting things to keep in mind. So, but TIFFs, because they are so big and beefy and solid, are dramatically larger file size wise than a JPEG is. So I'm going to now jump back over to the scan here, and we're going to rescan this very same picture as a JPEG to show you folks what I was talking about here. Okay, so if I'm going to rescan this, I'm now, instead of selecting JPEG here, I'm going to select TIFF down here at the bottom. Okay, all the other sizing, everything else is the same. We click OK, and we go to scan, and off it goes. So when this scan is done, and I think, oops, for some reason it didn't start here. Let's click OK again. There we go. I believe it takes the same amount of time to scan, even though it is going to be a larger image. But let's find out here. Because the last one was under a minute, and this is the same thing. So it's about the same time. Okay. So you'll see the green bar moving across, and we are scanning this into a TIFF. And when we can then see the two of them side by side in the folder where I'm saving these scans, that's where you see the dramatic sizing difference, file size wise, between a JPEG and a TIFF. Now the nice thing is that if you go ahead and scan all your images to TIFFs, you can always make a copy of that TIFF and convert it to a JPEG, and that's the one that you send out and share with people. So it's really absolutely a great and flexible format. There's no problem there, but it's just good to know that if you're scanning to the TIFF format, that they are difficult to, for example, share an email. I don't think any social media platform accepts a TIFF because they are so large. Okay, so how much larger are we thinking of here? I'm waiting for this other one to show up here. It hasn't shown up yet. Because we should be seeing two pictures of the schoolhouse right here, and we're not. Huh, where did the other schoolhouse go? Is it taking a long time to render? I don't think so. That is really strange. There should be a second picture here. There's the JPEG. I'm seeing that on the screen, and I am not seeing the TIFF. I don't know what happened to it. That's very strange. Let me try let's see if I can do a refresh. Ah, there it is. It finally showed up. Okay. So down here at the bottom, when I roll over the JPEG, I can see that it is 1.97 megabytes. That's pretty normal. And what's interesting is that for a 24-inch plus wide print, that's still pretty small, which is great. So, so under 2 megabytes in size, and then if I roll over the TIFF, the very same size, physical size that is, as far as inches goes, in the TIFF, we will see that we now have a print that is 99 megabytes. So essentially 50 times larger as a TIFF than it is as a JPEG. It is quite a difference. So TIFFs are while they are a professional archival format, it is certainly something that's going to take up a lot more hard drive space. And people who work in TIFFs typically have very robust computer systems and more than a few external hard drives, simply because they need all that storage space when you're working with files this large. So that is very basic scanning right there. There's a lot of stuff that I could go into. In fact, time allowing, and it'll be up to this presentation's moderator, but maybe we can go in. I will close this little tutorial section right here and restart another one. Maybe we can use it on more advanced scanning techniques. Okay? Very good. Okay, as a quick side tutorial, here is what it looks like when you are scanning a negative, for example. Okay, so here's a negative in a sleeve, and you folks will have to forgive me because I broke my wrist a couple months ago and my left hand doesn't work that well right now. It is undergoing physical therapy. So, if you are scanning negatives, Epson gives you one of these lovely carriers. The squares over here are for mounted 2x2 inch slides, which is the normal 35 millimeter slide size. The little cardboard pieces drop right in there, and you put them on the scanner. If you're doing negatives, the strips go into these slots here. So let me go ahead and do that real fast here for you. Let's go ahead and do this. We drop this in. It goes emulsion side down, if I'm not mistaken. They slide right into these little grooves, and you put the, I don't know what that's called. It's not a top. It's some sort of a stabilizing bar over the top of it, and it clicks into place here. Make sure everything is clicked down properly here. I think that's in. That should work. And that goes right, oops, I'm sorry, I did this upside down. No, wait a minute, let's see. Nope, it goes, wait a second. I haven't done this in so long. Okay, there we go. There it is. Okay, so also when you are, when you're doing either negatives or slides on this scanner, or most scanners, the top lid here, this section, which is what you use to reflect light back into the area for a print of a scan, this piece needs to come off because, let me see if I can roll this up slightly here. On the inside of the lid of the scanner is a separate light element, and that's what shines down through these, the negative or the slide that you're trying to scan. So here, I'm going to put this back over where it's supposed to be. Okay, like so. Okay. So, in fact, I wonder if I can leave that like that. I probably can, actually. I'm going to leave the lid in that position for this scan. So, and you can see now that the negatives that I've got in here are lined up with that light, and that's where they have to be. I had it wrong before, but if you are scanning mounted slides, you would turn this mounting piece this way, and it clicks into position over here so that the light lines up with the slides right here. So let's put this back like so. Put the lid down and hit preview. Where is my interface? Okay, so first of all, we have to go back up here. We have to do some of the resetting here. We are no longer doing a reflective scan because this is not a print. So we are now selecting film. And when you do film, it'll ask you, is it positive film, like a slide, or is it negative film? And you have a choice of either color negative or black and white negative. We're doing black and white negative there. I am still going to scan it at 24-bit color, which is fine. The 300 DPI is also fine. We don't need to do any descanning, or I'm sorry, what was it? It was the, yes, the thing I was looking for was the moire pattern mitigation, which is when you scan something for either from a magazine or a book photo. So that doesn't apply here because it knows that we're doing an original negative. So I do preview there, and we should see the negatives in the scanner on the preview scan come out as positives if I did this right. Let's find out. It's going to take a while to warm up here for a second. Just fine. Okay. Let's see what this looks like. You can do, I think, up to 12 negatives at a time. Okay, so there they are. It is upside down. That is a 1926 schoolhouse next door to Calabasas over in Cornell. If I were doing this correctly, I would go ahead and go back into the scanner and flip the negative around. But since this is just for illustration, I'm going to select the top of these two only, and I'm going to tell it that I want to do this again as a large. It's basically a 3x5 print area, but I also put in here several settings for 35mm full frame. Let me see if I can find that real fast here. Here they are, full frame 35mm. Let's try number 2, and I'm looking at the scan area. There are these little dots that may not be showing up on the video here, but it does put a series of broken lines around this thing to show you where it's going to scan, and that's actually a good full frame right there. So I'm going to scan this entire negative from side to side. You can actually pre-crop in these things if you want to as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do a full-size, full-frame scan of that thing as a black and white negative. And let's do this. Okay, I'm going to skip the TIFF. I'll leave it as a TIFF for now. That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to do a TIFF scan of this black and white negative. And let's get a scan going here. Now, sometimes these smaller originals, like this negative, will take longer to scan because the scanner light bar has to move slower sometimes to capture these smaller images. So it'll tell us here in a second what its time estimate is. It's saying right now, actually 7 minutes. I don't think it's going to take 7 minutes because I bet fairly soon here it'll drop down to 5 or to 4 or 3 or something like that. But let's see what this does here. Okay, it's already down to 6 minutes. And looking at how fast it's going, it looks like it'll be a 3 to 4 minute scan. So we're going to cut the video here and come back. Okay, that large scan of the small negative as a TIFF did take about 6 minutes to do, but when you at home are scanning your negatives, it won't take that long. This is a special situation where I did a TIFF and I did an oversized scan. Normally, a normal 35mm negative will take only like less than 2 minutes to do, but that one took 6. So anyway, so it has now been scanned in. And we are running into the situation again where for some reason it doesn't want to show up in my destination folder. So let me go ahead and click the refresh, and there it is. Okay, so what comes out here is and I'm waiting for this thing to render here. Here's the Cornell Schoolhouse upside down. Fortunately, we can flip it just like that. So there's the schoolhouse. But that is a scan from a negative. Again, 35mm, a small little original negative about this big has now been scanned into something about 30 inches across. So it's quite a bit larger than it was before. With a little more work, it's ready for a display print, and that is scanning a negative. I wish I had, like I said, I wish I had some mounted 35mm slides to show you how that works, but you can see it's basically the same process. You just drop the slides into the little area there, hit the preview, select your area, select your slide, tell what you want it to do, and hit the go button. And that's how nice and easy scanning is. So, very good. So hopefully you enjoyed that brief look at archival scanning and preservation. It was my pleasure to bring this information to you. If anyone has any questions, they can reach me through the library here. I am usually here on Wednesday and Friday afternoons, but can also be here by appointment. But on behalf of the rest of the staff, we are happy to be of service to you. We appreciate your patronage, and we are proud to be serving the good folks of Calabasas. This is your library, after all.